Everybody to today's committee hearing. The date is it's Wednesday, June 3rd, 2009. We do not have a quorum at this time, so we will move forward. All of the actions taken will be communiques from the chair. Ms. Barclay, why don't we start out with items 1 through 9? I think we can dispense of quickly, and then we have a couple of items for discussion. Item 1.
Yes, sir. Item 1. Item 1 is a report from the Community Redevelopment Agency and the City Administrative Officer relative to an exclusive negotiation agreement with Ansaldo Breda, Inc. for potential ground lease and redevelopment of a portion of the Clean Tech Manufacturing Center site.
Okay, on item 1, as a communique from the chair, we will adopt the CAO report. Item 2.
Item 2 is a report.
Hold on. I've got a card on item 1, but I don't see Rusty. Oh, what, you got a haircut? Rusty. Sorry, that's unprofessional of me. Good to see you, Mr. Hicks.
Good morning, council members. Rusty Hicks, the political director with the LA County Federation of Labor, speaking on behalf of Maria Elena DeRazzo, the Secretary-Treasurer, who's unable to be here. You've already moved the motion, so we just want to extend and let everyone know of our support for this particular measure.
Thank you. So are you in the National Guard or something?
The Navy, yeah.
Are you? Really?
I am, yeah.
Because he looks like our president looks from time to time when he has to get
Watch it, sir.
Yes. You look like Chris Majeski. He looks every day. Okay, so item 1, again, like I said, is a communique from the chair. We'll adopt the CAO's report. That brings us to item 2.
Item 2 is a report from the CRA and the CLA and a resolution relative to transferring funds from the Wilshire Center Koreatown Assembly Bill 1290 funds to the Bureau of Street Services for traffic triangles on Wilton Place.
Okay, it is my intention as a communique from the chair to adopt the CLA report on this. It's my understanding that Jim McQuiston would like to make a comment on this item. Jim, please come forward. Even though I'm going to do things differently today, anyone who speaks before the committee has to give your predictions for the Laker Magic and how many games. So that's the first thing, Jim. Who's going to win and how many games is it going to take?
Magically, it's going to be the Lakers in 7.
Okay, thank you. So, Andrew, no, Alan, let's write that down. Jim says Lakers in 7. No, I mean it. I want to write it down because when it's over, we'll see who was right. Good morning. I haven't seen you in a while.
No. Well, I try not to intrude when it's unnecessary. All right? Jim McQuiston, this one's got to be turned down. It's just against the California law for the expense, but it's also a ridiculous expense, and we can use that money. Let's say paving Wilshire Boulevard would be a much better idea than using it to do something which we really don't need on the street. It's been fixed already at much less expense. So it's something which would open the committee to ridicule, in my opinion, if the papers ever got wind of it. So let's save our budget. As you know, I'm trying to work on the budget so that we don't take gas next year. And spending almost $400,000 for something that's unneeded and won't fix anything is not something that we want to get into at this point.
Thank you, Jim. So again, on item 2, we'll adopt the CLA report. That brings us to item 3.
Item 3 are reports from the CRA and the CLA relative to increasing the purchase order for Goldfarb and Lippman in the amount of $75,000 for legal services related to the Marlton Square mixed-use development.
Okay, so item 3, we'll adopt the CLA report as a communique from the chair. Item 4 will continue. You just may want to read it into the record, though.
Item 4 is a report from the CRA and the CLA relative to awarding contracts on an as-needed basis to pre-qualified list of public art fabricators and technicians to assist with implementation of upcoming public art projects.
Okay, that brings us, again, like I said, we'll continue that item. That brings us to item 5.
Item 5 is a report from the CRA and the CLA and a resolution relative to transferring up to $80,000 to the Department of Public Works, Office of Community Beautification, to administer and operate a cleanup and beautification program on East Huntington Drive.
Okay, then we'll adopt the CLA report on that item. Item 6.
Item 6 is a report from the Los Angeles Housing Department and the CAO relative to amending the professional services contract with the Coalition for Economic Survival to extend the term for 3 months.
Okay, item 6, we'll adopt the CAO report. Item 7.
Item 7 is a report from the Community Development Department and the CAO relative to borrowing up to $4.7 million from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and negotiating a loan in that amount for the acquisition of Pico Hauser Retail Plaza.
Okay, so on that item, we will adopt the CAO report. And is this one as amended? Is that what I've been handed, or is that with the amendments? Okay, so,
And just for the record, that amendment was to instruct the CDD to structure the site-specific tax revenue-based loan to provide debt service payments on those revenues up to 49%.
okay. Item 8.
Item 8 is a report from the LHD and the CAO relative to program income projections for program years 2008 and 9 and 2009-10 and the conversion of residual receipt loans to amortizing loans.
Okay, on that item, we'll receive and file the Housing Department's report and the CAO report. Item 9.
Item 9 is a motion, Han Labange, relative to allocating $25,000 for establishing a new youth center for the Boys and Girls Club of South Bay.
Okay, we will adopt that motion. So all of these items at this juncture, Mr. City Attorney, will be considered communiques from the chair. That brings us to public comment. Okay, I have Chuck Tennant. Good morning.
I go with Obama and Wesson in 6.
Oh, wait a minute. No, you got some. Who's going to win, Chuck?
Lakers.
Okay,
Of
how many,
course.
how many games?
Pardon me?
How many games is it going to take?
I go with Obama and Wesson in 6.
In 6.
6.
In 6. Okay, good morning, Chuck.
Good morning.
See you.
Reason you haven't seen me so much is with regard to the Marine Life Protection Act initiative has angered a lot of Californians and people that live in the city. And $100 million in loss in local economy, 20,000 jobs, and loss of massive revenues are at stake, and 20 million in city tax revenue. Through my efforts to our state leaders, some things have happened on that, and mainly the massive closures of 1,100 miles of California coastline and recreational marine resources will further damage our sinking economy and growing budget deficit. It will cause more loss of jobs, housing, and revenues. Now, the California State Fisheries Coalition, there's an investigation of the Fish and Game Commission that they're going into to look at, because apparently on passing this initiative, there was some underhanded things that happened, some people that cast votes that should not. So now there's an investigation, and the special interests are taking over the Protection Act implementation process. It's a big mess, and it needs to be fixed so it doesn't get out of hand and hurt us. And it will hurt us. And you can't believe how many people, how many Californians are signing petitions of why this is going on when people are losing their jobs, the economy is in bad shape, and now there's things going on within there that nobody knows where the money's coming from. Nobody knows how they're spending it. And where's this $60 million coming from each year when it's implemented? Who's going to pay for it? We are. And one last thing on a sad note, on CNN recently, 36 kids were killed in the streets in Chicago. And it's a crisis there, and they're looking for ways to try and do something. with our gang task force and with the mayor and that, California could help them to ease this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Mr. City Attorney, we've just been joined by Mr. Cardenas, so we do have a quorum on the consent items. If Mr. Cardenas is fine with them, we can just move those without objection.
And that would be to approve items 1 through 3, continue 4, approve 5, 6, and 7 with an amendment on 7, receive and file 8, and approve 9.
I think you're right. Okay, Mr. City Clerk. So now it's your prediction, and I want you to write it down. So who are you? Call it.
For fear of being a homer, I am predicting the Lakers. I think they're going to take it in 4.
Lakers in 4? Okay, write it down. I want to see all of that. 4. City Attorney?
I think I'll go with President Obama. It's Lakers in 6.
Okay. Ms. Barclay?
I don't speak Laker.
You don't...
I had to say Lakers in 6? Okay, Mr. Cardenas.
Just act like you do.
Okay, sorry.
So Meg is Lakers in 6? Okay.
Ken.
Speak into the mic. We want people to know what kind of work we do here.
Game 5, I don't know.
What'd you say?
Lakers in 5.
Lakers in 5. Mr. Reyes?
Lakers in 7.
Mr. Cardenas?
Lakers in 6.
Okay, I gotta shake things up here. Lakers in 5, is that possible? Okay, I gotta take the safe bet. The chair says Lakers in 6. Okay. But I think we should really listen. I mean, Meg, since you know so much about, we're following your lead. So that brings us to what item?
Item 10, sir.
Okay, then let's read the motion and let's get going on it.
Item 10 is a motion, Wesson Reyes, relative to a proposed pilot program to help landlords make necessary repairs under the systematic code enforcement program who are now in the rent escrow account program and/or the rent reduction program.
Okay. Do we have, is anybody going to give a report on that, or?
I don't think so at this time. I believe the housing department is here.
Yeah, but, I mean, if there's no, well, I guess we can come up. See, they are afraid because they got to make a prediction.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Roya Babazadeh, Los Angeles Housing Department.
And there's more.
Well, this comes from a Lakers fan that they take it at the broom. Lakers will sweep Orlando.
Okay. All right.
I'm Domingo Salcedo with the Housing Department, and I also believe it'll be the Lakers in 6.
Okay. All right. So, talk to us a little bit about this problem and how this might be of some benefit, or you've got to have some. Say something.
New York has a program where they identify 200 buildings a year, and they target those buildings for repairs. What they do is once they identify those buildings, they'll notify the owner that they have to make all the repairs. These buildings were usually identified as the worst buildings in the city, and they require the owner make immediate repairs on all the violations that the inspectors have found immediately. Then they give them up to 4 months to make them more substantial hazardous repairs. What the city does now at this point is we have a systematic inspection program where the inspectors go out every 3 years and we conduct inspections in all the buildings in the city. And we would like to also at least inform you or recommend that we consider this motion as well.
Yeah, because we have concerns about, we have elderly, landlords that are really doing the best they can, and, based on their income, they're limited in what they can do. So it is our thought to try to come up with a way to provide them with some assistance or what have you. That's the main focus behind what we want to do with this.
That's correct, yes.
Anyway, then, if there are no questions, without objection, we'll adopt this motion. Thank you for coming. That brings us to item 11.
Item 11 is a presentation by and discussion of the Office of the Mayor's Housing That Works plan.
Okay. Mercedes, why are you here? Shouldn't you be buying a winter coat? Several? And some boots or something? Anyway, good morning, Helmy.
Thank you. Good morning. I appreciate being here, but I also realize this has been a relatively short agenda, so I'd like to ask, how much time would you like me to spend here?
Well, it depends on what your prediction is.
Lakers in 5.
Al, you got that? All right. No, I want you to just go through do your presentation.
Okay, we're going to set up a brief PowerPoint. I'm going to kind of speed through it, but the housing plan was a process. It took about 12 months to create a comprehensive housing plan for the city, and really what this was bringing 5 departments together to try to look at housing all the way from homelessness to home ownership. So it was really spanning the spectrum of housing in Los Angeles and getting the departments to work together in an integrated way. Is there a way for the council members to see the presentation?
It's not in the...
This is a shortened version of what you have in front of you. What I want to do is just cover the highlights of the plan.
Watch yourself, Andrew. Why don't you just twist it?
Well, but then you need the projector.
We need some laborers. Where's Local 300? Or maybe IBW, electrical.
Yeah, they'll do every job.
Or movers.
Yeah, or movers or something. Oh, yeah, this is getting challenging.
How many IBW?
Oh, that's good. That's fine.
We're done with this.
Hey, the labor guy just left, Russ.
Yeah, can you go ahead and hit the...
We got it.
Okay. Let's go to the next slide, the first slide. So it took us 12 months. It's a 5-year plan. We modeled this we took a look at Chicago's plan. We took a look at New York's plan. We basically were looking at what other large cities were doing with respect to housing and modeled this on their plan. But it was based on 5 departments coming together. Can you do the next? The big idea in the plan, the big concept, is that we'll invest $5 billion to produce and preserve 20,000 units of affordable and workforce housing in 5 years. And in that, we set very specific targets for every income level across the income spectrum. And we brought together the finance teams of all the departments engaged in housing to figure out how much money locally was going into housing and how much money we thought we could leverage across the system. The housing cabinet consists of the departments of the CRA, the planning department, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, the housing department, and the housing authority. So those 5 departments are meeting together. The concept of strategic alignment between departments is central to the discussion. We've been looking at common underwriting in cities where housing production works best. The departments that do finance housing underwrite together. They have common criteria for underwriting, which is not something we've had in the city. Linking our land use planning goals to the housing goals so that the planning department is part of thinking through how we're going to create housing in Los Angeles. We have a multi-year capital plan, so we've looked at capital flows across the 5 years, and we brought together a legislative strategy at both the federal and the state level with all the departments participating in developing that. The capital program is $1 billion locally. What we have is about $200 million a year coming out of the Housing Authority, the Housing Department, the CRA, and LAHSA. And so over 5 years, that's about $1 billion of local money federal money coming through the local agencies or tax increment, but $1 billion is locally controlled that we leverage up over 5 years with $4 billion of outside capital. One of the results of creating this plan was we were able to engage Enterprise, national nonprofit, major financer of housing, across the entire system of housing, and they made a commitment to fund $700 million over the next 5 years in Los Angeles housing. And this is similar. They made a similar announcement about 5 years ago in New York with Mayor Bloomberg, and put $1 billion in New York. Our system is a little smaller than the New York system, but they put in a $700 million commitment. And that is a significant for us as a city. They, as an organization nationally, have been pulling back their commitments in smaller cities across the nation and really focusing in large urban areas such as Los Angeles. So we're really pleased to have this partnership. There's a few concepts that are outlined in the plan: sustainable transit communities, promoting mixed-income housing, building permanent supportive housing for homeless, transforming public housing, addressing the foreclosure crisis, streamlining development, preserving affordability of the rental housing market, and educating landlords and tenants. All of these things grew out of, were not things that were, sort of policy ideas that were intended to soar over anything that's being done. This actually was a ground-up process that came from the departments and is consistent with what the council has been directing the departments to do for some time. So this is really integrating policy that's already being discussed in the city. Next. Sustainable transit communities. This is the concept is to bring together investment in housing, jobs, transportation, and environmental sustainability in 20 sites in the city. Right now we have 60 transit-oriented districts in the city of Los Angeles, fixed rail, fixed bus on our current system. We're currently planning 10 TODs along the Expo line and the Gold line. The idea is to look at 10 additional communities where we can do land use planning and basically make them investment-ready communities so that in 3 years, as the market returns, we see rapid investment by right and we achieve investment in jobs, in housing, in mixed-income housing, in environmental sustainability, retrofitting of existing buildings, as well as opportunities to link to what the housing authority is doing, opportunities to link to what the transit system is doing. So it's really integrating these concepts around the transit system. Mixed income housing, I think you all know fairly well. Let's go to the next slide. This is something that I've shown around to various community meetings. This was looking at the RHNA need, the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. The City of Los Angeles needs about 14,000 new households in each year. That's the estimated new housing demand each year across the income spectrum. So this is what is planned by SCAG, the estimated need. And then we took a look at what was built last year. Let's go to the next slide. And what we've been building, and this is consistent with what we've been doing over the last 20 years, is we've actually been building consistently at the high end, and we've been underbuilding at the low and middle. And so, the concept of mixed income housing and the concept of the housing plan overall is to come up with strategies to increase our supply of housing across the income spectrum.
Tell me if I may, if you move back to that one slide. If you look at that slide and you see the geographic areas of the city of where our planning tools have been maximized, you'll see that the areas that you have little production also have had very little planning and land use strategies implemented. Community plans that were supposed to have started have stopped, and they just started about 2 years ago. So it's not only the fact that we're not building it, we're not creating the inducements and the land use incentives to create these facilities. So they go hand in hand, and I just wanted to point that out because that's a very telling graphic.
Pardon me. I will say that as an aside, one of the things that in the stimulus funding, we've been looking for is money for planning. And right now, as the economy is not favoring development, now is a very good time to invest in planning. And with the current budget crisis at the city, I think the planning department is getting hit very hard financially. So we've been looking and talking with various federal agencies about whether or not they could put money into land use planning, because we think that should be an emphasis of our current housing activity is doing good plans.
Well, that sets the table, if you will. If you can set the table for someone, invite a guest to your house, want to set the table for them, you want them to enjoy. And we haven't set the table for the areas that have this greatest need in those income groups, so it's very good that we're pushing in that direction.
So I know you're all very familiar with this. This is really just pieces of presentation I've taken around to the city. 32 California cities have adopted mixed income housing policies. Some of them are local cities that are identified here. In the mayor's housing plan, the concepts that we've put forward as far as the mixed income policy is that it be citywide, that it be mandatory, that it have flexible options for implementation, so it doesn't have to, it can be implemented in different ways, that we encourage partnerships, particularly partnerships between for-profit developers and affordable housing developers, and that we include in it incentives and financial tools.
Tell me, I think Mr. Cardenas has a question.
Can you go back to that slide, please? Flexible implementation options. Every time I see that, I see you go west of the 405 in West Los Angeles, and they're going to build expensive housing, and then they're going to throw the money into a fund, and then the neighborhood councils and the council member are going to say, not on our side of town. If you want people at $50,000 household income, $70,000 household incomes, $25,000 household incomes, they're not living in our neighborhoods. So I'm just letting you know right now, I'm sick and tired of people rhetorically, especially liberal West Siders, speaking rhetorically and actually running organizations that have to do with housing, but are not willing to recognize the fact that they're not willing to challenge their own neighbors to say, there are going to be people with those incomes living in our neighborhood. So that's one of the biggest problems that I have is with these broad statements such as flexible implementation options. I see that as just a veil over the idea that people are not going to have to do on-site mixed use.
Well, I'd like to respond. I absolutely, the mayor absolutely agrees with you. It is not a veil about taking housing requirements out of wealthier communities and putting them elsewhere in the city. That is not what this is about. In fact, the discussion that we've been having with the planning department is looking at the mixed income need within the areas where there's the least amount of affordable housing, particularly on the west side. So on-site does not necessarily, the reason why the flexibility is whether you do it on-site or off-site within the same community. And the reason for that flexibility is cost per unit. In high-rise projects, and this has been something the developers have said repeatedly, in high-rise projects, the cost to implement on-site is often much higher than if you implement a modified construction type nearby.
Oh, really? I'm all ears. What exactly is so different about a unit on the 32nd floor and the cost differential between a unit on the 33rd or the 31st floor if it's on-site? I would think that it would be cheaper on-site, especially if we're going to allow somebody a height variance so they'd actually add a few more units, and then on-site, because all of your bases costs are already in that particular structure. So if somebody's going to build, they're going to build a facility that's 20 stories tall. Not that that doesn't happen around here. Say it's 20 stories. But they're height limited to those 20 stories. But we're allowed to give them an incentive by our own efforts and by our own remodification. We give them a variance where they get 2 more floors. And on those 2 floors, therein they put those low-income units. I do not understand how it's cheaper to put those units on another site. I really don't understand that.
Let me jump in if I may. And when Mr. Cardenas is finished, Mr. Reyes has a question. But Tony makes a good point. So explain that to us. Why, in their mind, is it more cost effective, or is it cheaper to do it somewhere else? What is their explanation?
Well, it's really, the explanation by developers is about construction type. And this was when we had the developer committee get together to talk about implementation. If you're developing high-rise construction with all concrete and steel, the cost per unit is usually well above $400,000, $500,000. If you're building a stick-built project on a concrete platform, or if you're doing a podium with a stick-built project, your cost per unit is probably going to be driven down to maybe $300,000 per unit. That's just, and those are just construction types. And in fact, there are projects where you can do two construction types on the same site plan even. You can do a site where you have a high-rise and you have a lower-rise housing project. It really is about the cost. Can we get more units at a lower cost? The flexibility is to provide options, to focus on the goal of affordability, but to provide options that allow for financial feasibility. I know this is something that's going to be discussed by the departments and by council as this moves through council. So I don't want to, I'm happy to share with you what I understand to be the issues, but
Because I don't quite understand that. Were you finished, Mr. Curtis? Mr. Reyes? I mean,
We're not taking a vote today, this is presentation.
Yes.
Okay. We just had a major case come to Plum yesterday. It's in the Century City area. Reviewing the case and the project with the developer and the principal parties, they had spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on the community benefit side, where they were able to justify a LEED building, environmentally friendly, thousands and thousands of dollars on greening and landscaping. And I asked the question, so how much of this will go to affordable housing on site? And it's almost like the house of cards would have came down that I would have injected that question in that meeting, and there was no real good answer. The answer was, well, we'll set aside some money, and we'll have vouchers or funding for affordable units in that area. So there are no affordable units in Century City. There are no affordable apartments in Century. This doesn't exist. So once we got through that discussion, the next discussion was, well, we're going to generate X amount of millions of dollars, I think it was 10 million, from the retail activity that's being proposed on the site. Why don't you get a stream of funds from the $10 million that the city will realize from its retail sales tax activity? And I said, well, more than likely, because we are $500 million in debt as a city, we're in the hole, that money will probably go into the general fund. To take a stream of that income dedicated just to housing has yet to be done. We've done it with Section 108 type programs, and that's only been done 2 or 3 times in the history of the city. And even those, I think one has failed. But when you look at these concepts, we really need to start, I believe, looking at how we bring up those issues at the front end. Now, many council members, and I'm trying to be diplomatic here, will say, I do want affordable housing, but in the end, they end up with and they'll say, well, we have senior housing, but we don't want family housing. We want workforce housing, we'll stay at this level, senior housing at a lower percentage. Councilmen are upset because SB 1818 is at 10%. I was asking for 20, 25. Now they're upset because it's 10%. We should have had more when we could have voted for something more. So my point is, if we're going to be looking at these strategies, we need to look at it on a case-by-case, learn from what has happened already, and inject those policy recommendations. And that's what I tend to do in this discussion. But I think the menu of options for funding, when we talk about community benefit, the housing fund and or housing on site should be a high priority. And it's not happening right now. And I'm hoping the mixed income policy we'll hopefully address that. And, but I want to put that as an example of what we go through, what we've been going through for the past 7 or 8 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
I need to point one thing out.
Oh, go right ahead.
Chairman, just pointing something out. I know you're just using numbers, and we're not going to hold you to it, 400,000, 300,000, or what have you. But if you're talking about a $5 billion plan and 20,000 units, that's an average unit cost of 250,000. And that's what struck me as my staff was briefing me earlier on this. That's one of the questions that I want clarified to my office, as to how we arrive at the $5 billion to get us 20,000 units.
I'm sorry.
$5 billion. It's my understanding that this is a $5 billion plan, and the goal is over 5 years to get 20,000 units.
Oh, I'd be happy to share that with you. The finance team of all the departments got together. We have a detailed spreadsheet that shows every capital dollar going into the system and how we intend to leverage it. I think that the focus of the city is really on our local billion, how we get that spent. The leveraging may fluctuate. I mean, we're making best estimates on the leveraging and how much we'll leverage, but that will fluctuate. And in the current market, we expect quite a bit of fluctuation. But we absolutely have the detail on this plan. We'd be happy to share it with you.
Well, yeah, I want to see the details. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, transforming public housing is a big piece of this plan. We've been working, as you know, on Jordan Downs with the Housing Authority. This is transformation of almost 100-acre site in Watts that currently has about 700 housing units, and we are looking at master planning the school, Jordan High, which is on the site. In fact, will you go to the next slide? I think that one is more interesting. This is the orange square or rectangle you see is the site of Jordan Downs. The yellow is Jordan High. Along the far right side of it is sort of light industrial uses currently. The Housing Authority has created a community advisory committee, so there's a community group that's been involved in the looking at the visioning. They've hired a master plan consultant, and a master plan will be coming out later at the end of the summer. The idea here is to transform not only public housing, but to transform the school. We've got a green job zone in there. We've brought a gang reduction zone. It's adjacent to the 103rd Street station. We're looking at a transit-oriented district plan, so we can really look at, commercial and housing development. The neighborhood stabilization program is the foreclosure program is wrapping around the site, so we're looking at creating home ownership opportunities surrounding the public housing and enabling residents of public housing to move into first-time home buyer programs, and sort of linking together the work of several departments here. This also is being planned currently by the planning department. So the planning department is doing a specific plan with funding from HACLA. So it really is about integrating all the departments. The foreclosure...
On the Housing Authority side, is William Mead area being looked at? I know we've had these discussions and there have been some initial conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Is that carrying itself through? Are we doing the necessary follow-up to see what strategy would be most strategic?
Yes. As what was set forth in the mayor's, in this housing plan, this 5-year housing plan, was 2 additional visioning, beginning the visioning of 2 additional public housing projects. William Mead sort of has come up since the plan was written and has a lot of interest for the Housing Authority. So they're taking steps now to figure out how to do the visioning that's necessary for that.
Well, we've already layered in the necessary zoning. Mm-hmm. We've layered in the necessary relationships with the various jurisdictions. So we've had conversations from Water and Power. So from my office, we are 5 years into it already, mm-hmm. and we've been doing this independently. We're hoping that the mayor's office could see the advantage of moving that at a different pace, only because we're way past envisioning as far as my office goes, and we'll be able to put in place as we adjust the zoning patterns to create the urban village zone that's within the specific plan of Central City North and the Royal Cycle specific plan. Mm-hmm. So I just want to put that.
Well, I totally understand the vision work that has been done by the planning department and by your office and the leadership on it. We support that move and absolutely agree that it's an opportunity to move forward. What I mean by visioning with respect to the Housing Authority is before we begin engaging in public conversations about what we're going to do with the housing site, the Housing Authority has to begin engaging the community residents, and that hasn't happened yet on site. But they're moving forward on that.
It has happened on Mead Housing, though. We've had those meetings with the community already. So we should catch up. Thanks.
Okay, keep going. Foreclosure response, this is work that, has been tackled by the Housing Department very successfully. It was put forth in the housing plan. The concept of launching the neighborhood stabilization program, we've now got in place the Home Buyer Assistance Program has just launched. We've got foreclosure counseling, as you know, in the work source centers as well as all over the city. We have begun work in our office with neighborhood councils in terms of eyes on the street monitoring of blight, making sure that we don't have vandalism taking place. So working with neighborhood councils in areas where there's a high level of foreclosure. And we are putting together a workforce housing strategy that's coupled with the response to the foreclosure, using it as an opportunity to identify core industry sectors where we can link our housing strategy to our jobs base. Let's keep going. On the homelessness front, the shift is really, this is a national strategic change, shifting away from managing homelessness towards ending homelessness. And within the housing plan, the city, we've put forward a proposal, a sort of a trajectory of 2,200 units of permanent supportive housing, bringing together the CRA, the Housing Department, and the Housing Authority to ensure that we're creating a supply of permanent supportive housing. We've been actively engaged in our conversation with the county about how to link services, particularly with the Department of Mental Health and Department of Health Services, but how to link services to permanent supportive housing. We think the city's got to stay focused on the production of permanent supportive housing, though, as our main focus on the homelessness. We also are looking at expanding Section 8 vouchers for long-term residents of shelters, moving people from shelters into housing, and at the highest level, really engaging with HUD and HHS on combining housing capital money with service money. I just returned. I was last week in Washington, D.C. with the National Alliance to End Homelessness, where I had the opportunity to meet with the Secretary of HHS as well as the Secretary of HUD and discuss the issue, and the VA, and we discussed the issue of interagency collaboration at the federal level and how important that would be for us as a city to bring the city and the county together around homelessness. That really is something I think we need to see happen here in a much clearer, focused way. So that's what this effort is around. Preserving rental affordability, this is a piece of work that both the CRA and the Housing Department have been working on. We have about 14,000 covenants, affordable covenants in the city of Los Angeles that are about to expire in the next 5 years. The Housing Department's done an extraordinarily good job of identifying the covenant, or identifying the time frame for the covenant expirations. And so one of the things that we are doing collectively, this is going to put pressure on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and our financing of affordable housing, because in order to extend the covenants and to rehabilitate, this is going to cost money. And it doesn't create new units, it just extends, it keeps what we've got in the supply chain. But that is a piece of the plan, in addition to which we've been working on a Skid Row plan to look at the downtown SRO units, putting 1,000 of those in the next 5 years under long-term affordability covenants.
Excuse me,
Reyes.
You raised an interesting point in terms of the crossroads we're in. So I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. The funding that we have put in place for new affordable housing, are we looking at that same fund and decide, do we move in that direction, or do we move that money to maintain our Section 8 and to maintain any other existing covenants we may have so that affordable units stay accessible to the folks. Are you saying we're at that crossroads? Are you saying that that's the recommendation? I just want to make sure I understood what you're saying right there.
Well, we're not talking about taking money from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and putting it into Section 8. That's not what this is.
How about the former notice of funding availability? I know there was a note for about a year and a half or 2 years ago, I forget, where we held it back. We didn't move forward. We did not ask for new proposals, and the understanding was, well, maybe we don't do that because we need that money for preserving existing housing. Are you familiar with that discussion?
I'm not familiar with that discussion. I am, the only discussion I'm familiar with here is a discussion internally within the city departments about what the potential effect of losing covenant-restricted housing from our existing supply. And I think that we are still looking at what the solutions are. The solutions may not, in every case, require a great deal of funding. There may be solutions for preservation that are through negotiation with landlords. So it doesn't necessarily mean that everything that we preserve is going to cost a lot of money, although I think we are going to have to look at rehabilitation costs. But the point is for us as a city to be aware that these are, most of what you see here is what was the earliest funded tax credit projects. So some of the early funded projects that are starting to see the covenants expire, what happens when they expire? Do we now lose those units as affordable units? How can we keep them in the supply? And I think we need more work on how to fund and what our strategy is going to be.
Okay.
I would say, just acknowledge that both jointly, the CRA and the Housing Department went after a grant from the MacArthur Foundation and were awarded funding specifically for the strategic plan around preservation, and it's a high priority for both departments.
I look forward to that discussion. Thank you.
And that's it. That's everything that's in the plan.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so very much. Is Jim still here? My question, I see you. Yeah, Jim asked to speak on this issue. You didn't come up here to change your prediction, did you? Is that why you wanted to speak?
No. I have my fingers crossed. Jim McQuiston. I thank the mayor for doing this kind of work. As Councilmember Cardenas was so aptly putting it, I did a little calculation too, and the mayor is predicting units which should have a rental of $2,500 a month. That is not affordable housing. Someone is going to have to pick up that difference. And I do want to point out that I have predicted next year we may be cut down to 1,400 people that have to run the entire city outside of the police and fire department. We do not have this kind of money. And we have to think in other terms. My opinion is when we're talking about high-rise is 6 stories. That's what HUD said. That was the maximum that was beneficial. But I live in an area in a 90-year-old house where we had rich and poor. We still have Section 8 people living next to millionaires. And we have found in that area that is beneficial as long as the Section 8 apartments are not too large. They find out that they can get ahead because they can see other people who got ahead. When we have ghettos, that's the wrong way to go. And when we're talking about high-rise, we're talking about an investment where people are going to say, NIMBY, you know. We've got to build smaller units, and as an engineer, I know you can build these a lot cheaper. I was impressed with Consolidated Hotels, who for years and years built units at $10,000 a unit, and they could rent those for $100 a month, whereas no one else could. They built thousands of them, and they were very, very good units. They kept them in good condition. They were beautiful units, and we can do the same thing still. And it just irritates me that we're talking about these expensive units when We really need this kind of integration which shows people how to get ahead rather than building ghettos. And that's what I'm determined that we do not want to do again.
Jim? Again, Helmy, I want to thank you and the mayor's office for the presentation, and, we look forward to working with you on housing issues as we, in the future. Ms. Barclay, is there any more business before this committee?
No, sir. Go Lakers.
I think there is one other little bit. No, I got it. I made eye contact.
Okay, predictions.
I want your predictions first.
That's right.
Since the Washington Wizards aren't in, so you don't have to be concerned. So, Magic Lakers
Lakers,
win. How many games?
6.
Okay. Now, I really didn't want Mercedes to come up here to say anything. I know Mercedes and I have had private discussions, and she knows how I respect her very much and that I care about her very much, but I just wanted to publicly say that it has been my pleasure working with you, and that I personally will miss you very much, that I've learned a lot from you, that I wish you the best. And because of you, I'm slowly but surely beginning to understand this committee that I've been selected to chair. So I wish you, again, success, but I want you to know from this chair, you will be missed. I will miss my friend.
Thank you very much, sir.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I've been working in the city since the early 90s and had the privilege of sitting as a deputy to then former chairman Mike Hernandez and in this committee. And I've seen the transitions from mayor to mayor, from department head to department head. And I must say that under your leadership, we've seen a structural change in how we look at the housing challenge and how we are then effective in dealing with areas of greatest need, which has not always been the priority for those in the past. So I appreciate the level of professionalism and focus and resources that were brought to bear and are being felt by thousands and thousands of families because of the efforts of your leadership and the team that you put together. So thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
So anyway, that's it, my dear friend. I figured I'd stick it to you one more time when I had a chance. When are you? When are you going to?
It is possible that the confirmation vote will be next week.
Okay. All right. Anyway, good to see you. Since there are no more business before this committee is adjourned. Thank everyone for coming.